Everybody beware, you better prepare. Disaster can happen anytime, anywhere. Everybody beware, you better prepare. Disaster can happen anytime, anywhere.
Greetings, everyone. From Danger to Safety is a production of the National Emergency Management Agency, Nema, and I'm your host, Vesta Southwell. Today, I'm so very pleased to have as our guest on the program Mrs. Claricia Langley-Stevens, who is the Deputy National Disaster Co-ordinator, and she joins us now to speak about an upcoming exercise being chaired by Nema called Caribe Wave. Welcome to the program, Mrs. Stevens.
Good day, and thank you very much.
This is the first time I think you're joining us in this environment, so welcome to our new broadcast room here at NEMA.
Yes, thank you so much.
All right, so let's start. When did NEMA first participate in Caribe Wave, and what was the concept behind the exercise?
So Nima has been participating in Caribe Wave over the last 10 years. Um, there are several components that encourage the agency with such responsibility to be able to engage UNESCO, who is the orchestrators of this particular exercise. Now, Caribe Wave, in essence, is simply an opportunity for countries worldwide to be able to test their tsunami ready response mechanism. And of course, National Emergency Management Agency being the guardians of emergency response management, risk reduction, and all of those critical areas, we have been charged with that responsibility of actually executing Caribe Wave here in St. Kitts. And of course, the Nevis Disaster Management Department on Nevis. But of course, it's collaborative. Now, in 2016, St. Kitts and Nevis, having embraced the comprehensive disaster management mandate coming from CDEMA, our parent organization based in Barbados, we were able to benefit significantly from the Tsunami Ready program that was funded through UNESCO and supported by CDEMA and the government of St. Kitts and Nevis. And 2 years leading up to that recognition in 2016, we were able to engage in a series of education and awareness campaigns that spoke to tsunamis and what they were and what would cause a tsunami. And I believe that most people would agree that tsunami education and readiness is important to us because we are an island surrounded by water, and tsunami is a water-based hazard. So I think it was critical and timely for the government to invest in St. Kitts and Nevis becoming tsunami ready, with NEMA being the responsible agency.
What does tsunami readiness entail?
Okay, so tsunami ready is merely a phrase that indicates that St. Kitts and Nevis, to some extent, has basic working knowledge as to best responses or best practices in the event that we are threatened by a tsunami, as well as we have access to resources that would allow for the general public to be able to understand the type of response or actions that we anticipate from them in the event that we are told that a tsunami is imminent or threat is imminent. And you're talking about things such as programs of this nature to be able to educate persons. We're talking about signage being erected throughout the island. And of course, in more critical areas where the coastal areas are closer to land spaces that are occupied, or it could be, for example, a place like Frigate Bay Strip, where it's fully functional both day and night, but it is in extreme close proximity to the seawater or the coastline. And so that is something that is deemed, or you would hear us refer to as being in a tsunami hazard zone. And of course, there are communities around the island that are in close proximity to the coastal areas. So it's important for us to erect appropriate signage to let the general public know that you are situated in a tsunami hazard zone, and in the event that something happens, this is what we expect you to do. That's why our education and awareness program through our communications unit had such a critical role to play in St. Kitts and Nevis, fully understanding what is required, what is expected of them as individuals, but more so what the agency is prepared to do to be able to support a better tsunami ready response program.
Was the identification of, say, assembly points and that sort of thing integral to our increased tsunami readiness capacity?
Definitely. And this is where I really want to commend the physical planning department and public works for being close partners with NEMA on this particular venture, because physical planning did a lot of work in terms of identifying appropriate muster points or assembly points or safe zones, as some of us refer to them, because these are areas in various communities that allow for the community members who are in the tsunami hazard zone, in the event that an evacuation becomes necessary, that they will move collectively to this area where the agency expects to have first responders to be able to provide guidance or additional information and support. Public Works, in this case, they were able to support the program through erecting these signs, physically erecting the signs, that is their area of competence, and we were very happy to partner with them. So once the sites were identified by physical planning and vetted by NEMA and approved by the Mitigation Council, then we proceeded in having these signs erected. So if you're looking around St. Kitts, you're driving around St. Kitts, you would see these blue and white or silverish signs, and they're illuminated, of course, for nighttime or vehicular traffic, so that once the vehicular lights spot them, you'll be able to see them and read them clearly. I think that particular exercise really positioned St. Kitts and Nevis to better understand that tsunamis are real. We may not have been threatened by a tsunami, but of course, there are parts of the world that would have been devastated and completely destroyed as a result of a tsunami. And we are in the business and the practice of preparing and mitigating where we can, so that in the event that it becomes our reality, then we would have a very good idea as to the actions to be taken and who would be responsible for managing these actions and so forth. And everybody has a role to play in tsunami ready response. And I'm sure that we would all recognize that over the last few years, NEMA has been working very, very closely with the Ministry of Education. And that is because we recognize that several of our schools are located in tsunami hazard zones. And we wanted to make sure that that population gets access to as much training and information as possible. So I can tell you there are persons who are worried about the welfare of their children, and I can say with more certainty that the children know what to do better than their parents, because we continue to drill them in school. We continue to have these conversations with the school emergency management teams, and I think that in itself has ensured that St. Kitts and Nevis tsunami ready response mechanism touches all strata of society, from the youngest to the oldest, and that is something that we're prepared to continue in terms of when we are at that place of renewal for that readiness response, because it's not something that lasts forever.
Right.
There's always new information, new technology, new individuals who are attached to the Tsunami Ready program. So we are expected to renew our interest in Tsunami Ready every 4 years. And so we are at that place now in St. Kitts and Nevis where we are up for renewal, and there are some things that have been elevated. And I believe that having this conversation with you would better position the general public to understand that we are not asleep at the wheel. And Tsunami Ready is not a NEMA only initiative. It's taking on the comprehensive approach where it's all persons having the responsibility of not only knowing what to do, but doing it to the best of their ability when it becomes necessary.
And of course, you mentioned that the school children know better than many, many adults what to do in the event of. But I wanted to share, as most of us understand, that they are also among our very best ambassadors in terms of sharing of information. So we are thankful for that. You did mention the Department of Physical Planning and Public Works Department as two of our strong collaborators in this exercise, and others. Who are some of the other agencies that NEMA would collaborate with in terms of managing this exercise?
So thank you. So at the regional level, we have been given a lot of support from SIDEMA. We have been given a lot of support from CITIC, which is the Caribbean Tsunami Information Center, and that is based in Barbados. And they are our caretakers as it relates to tsunami. We also have support from the Seismic Research Center. That is a part of the University of the West Indies in Trinidad and Tobago, and they're responsible for monitoring seismic related activity. And of course, we know seismic activity can sometimes lead to tsunami impact. We are also at the international level get support through our tsunami 24-hour monitoring center, and they do that for us internationally. And it's the Pacific Tsunami Warning Center. They do a lot of work with the products that we use here in St. Kitts and, of course, all over the world. I can tell you that tsunami response has embraced technology to the highest. I believe that we are not where we want to be in terms of the technology that allows for us to be 100% effective, but we are well on our way. I think one of the missing components that St. Kitts and Nevis is facing right now as it relates to tsunami is the absence of an early warning system. And with that early warning system, we are seeing partnership with entities such as ZIZ Broadcasting Corporation and all other radio stations who continue to carry our public service announcements, which are messages geared towards information sharing about tsunami and tsunami response. And I think that is extremely critical. We are also working very closely with the security and first responders. Police, for example, at the 24-hour monitoring station, which is 911, they're the ones who are looking at the monitors while we are sleeping. And in the event that something happens where St. Kitts and Nevis need to pay closer attention, they're the ones who would make that call. So it's like they have the red phone, as you would hear the Americans say, and make that call to NEMA to indicate that something is happening and we need to pay attention. Additionally, I would want to say that our volunteers, the NEMA volunteers throughout our 8 districts here in St. Kitts are very critical to tsunami ready response because they live in our communities. They understand the intricacies and the layout of their communities. They know the waterways and they know the alleys and the byways. They know where the vulnerable population reside. They know where the government critical infrastructures are in their communities. And so they are a critical partner with us. And like we always say at NEMA, the work of the agency cannot be carried by the staff of the agency because our numbers are so small. And that is why our numbers yield when you embrace the volunteers within the communities. And so just like any other hazard that we prepare for, when you talk about the volunteer mechanism, they're integral, critical, and they're very important players and partners with the agency.
Tell me about the players within the exercise.
Okay. So for Caribe Wave, we have been accustomed, and it's practice, that we allow for institutions to be able to test their emergency response mechanism, particularly evacuation. And so we want to know that if we announce that a tsunami is coming and we give a time, we want people to evacuate their facilities, those especially in the tsunami hazard zones, within a reasonable time. And if you ask me what a reasonable time is, people might think I'm crazy for saying this, but it's usually under a minute. You have less than a minute to evacuate a facility, and it doesn't matter the size.
Wow.
But you can only achieve that through practice, and we do a lot of practice during Caribe Wave. Now, Caribe Wave suggests that you evacuate, you use a predetermined evacuation route, and then you go, to the assembly point. No. Fast forward. In the context of COVID, we are saying that you should not socially gather, and that presents a challenge for us. So it means then that we have to go back to the drawing board and see how best we can safely evacuate people through practice, of course, but not allow for the clustering and the gathering of large crowds. And if that has to happen, we also have to make sure that within our tsunami ready response that we continue to talk about the protocols, the wearing of the mask and the sanitation of hands, because even an emergency, if something really has to happen and we are looking at the possibility of community spread, that would only make matters worse for us. And of course, the Nema and the Ministry of Health and the government, by extension, would have a real situation on our hands. And so for Caribe Wave this year, and I know Mrs. Petty is going to elaborate more about some of our activities, but just to say that we are going to be taking more of a virtual approach, which is very new for us. Last year, our intentions were good, but because of the introduction of COVID, we had to step back. And so we are now going to engage the persons who indicated an interest in playing or participating last year. And we are going to be taking them on that virtual journey where we're able to engage them in certain critical areas. For example, if they don't have a plan, we're going to be working with their emergency response teams or the individual responsible for emergency response within the organization to start working on a draft plan. And we're going to present a template. We're going to be doing this in collaboration with fire and police and our volunteers, and to be able to see how many persons we can reach in terms of presenting them with this draft document, and then, of course, adding to it, making it as comprehensive as possible to not only look at tsunamis, but other hazards that they might be vulnerable to when we do the vulnerability assessment for these persons of interest.
Claricia Langley-Stevens, Deputy National Disaster Co-ordinator here at Nema. Thank you so much for joining us on the program. I'm Vesta Southwell. Blessed.
Beware, you better prepare. Disaster can happen anytime, anywhere. Everybody beware, you better prepare. Disaster can happen anytime, anywhere.